Okay, let's talk a little bit about when you first met and your courtship and your marriage. Why don't you tell us the story of how you first met?
Want me to tell it first?
Yeah, let's hear both versions.
Okay. My brother and I went down to the BYU on the first day of January 1928. And inasmuch as it was New Year's Day, the school wasn't generally open, but there was a few working in the college hall. And we went over to the college hall and was looking through the building. And in one of the offices was a young girl working. And I walked in there myself. My brother and his friend were someplace else, and I just stopped in and asked some questions of this girl, and she was very knowledgeable and just about the perfect one to get information from, and I was getting information about the school, and she was telling me about it. And then my brother and his friend realized that I was separated from them, and they came looking for me and says, "Well, what happened to you?" And I said, "Well, I just found a friend here that's helping me. I don't know who she is, but she sure is helping me." And Claude Brown was the friend. He says, "Well, there's no reason why you shouldn't be acquainted. Delbert, this is Jennie Holbrook." And he introduced us, and that's how we met.
Is that how it was, Grandma? Why don't you tell your side?
Well, I'm always glad to have the last word. He neglected to mention that when I looked at him, I thought, well, this is something extra special. And from then on, I don't think he had a chance to escape.
I was
really impressed.
It was really interesting that, you know, it could be said kind of facetiously, but still truthfully, that my purpose in going down to the BYU was to find a real wonderful girl that I could marry and have as my wife. And I married the first girl I saw.
I wasn't sure he wanted to stay and register after that. Took a little while to get acquainted. Quite a little while.
Many of us went to the BYU. Why don't you tell us what it was like when you were there and dating? What some of the activities and things that you did?
Well, you know, my start is just on the 1st of January 1928, and it was really a pretty good-sized school, and I thought it was immense compared with the Far West School and the schools that I'd been familiar with. But Jennie had really been raised by the BYU. She could tell right from the kindergarten up. That's where I learned about the BYU, was from her.
Of course, back in those days, it was small compared to 26,000 today. I think we had about 1,200 when I was going. And the high school was almost as important as the college at that time. In fact, I think when I graduated, we had, what, 150 graduates? Something like that.
I think so. I think 1,300 students was...
You know, that was about right, and maybe 150 in our graduating class. But as Dad mentioned, that was almost like home to me. Mm-hmm. All of us I went to kindergarten when I was 4 and 5 at the BYU training school, and then on up clear through we graduated. And at this particular time, our first date was what we called the Banyan Dance. And that was really a big affair put on by the committee, you know, putting out our BYU yearbook, which was called the Banyan. And all our devotionals were marvelous. in those days. We used to hold them in College Hall, which would only seat maybe 1,300, something like that, but no one would even think of missing. And of course, my grandfather was president for many years, and you know, he'd stop. He'd always walk to school, stop at our home on so often, very close to him, and all of my brothers, my one brother and all the sisters went there. Of course, since then, all of our children have graduated from BYU, so it's been a big part of our lives.
Why don't you tell us more about that first date?
You know, I mentioned, I guess, that Mama came over to the Montague ward where I lived on my birthday on the 14th of February, just a month and a half after I first met her. And we had a kind of a mixer dance, and we got together, and she had looked up the registration data,
Held that on me.
and she knew it was my birthday. I thought that was quite special that she would be that interested. But I kind of had desire to ask her for a date, but finally got around to it several months later, really, because it was the Banyan Ball, and when I asked her, she kind of looked a little especially interested in it, and said, well, I think so, I think I can go. And I found out afterwards that she had been asked and had accepted a date, and then had been asked several times and turned them all down because she had a date. And then the boy that she had a date with got sick. And so I was about the 8th or 10th one to ask her, but I got the date. And we went to the Banyan Ball, and that was our first real date. And I was really excited, and I thought that was really something that I would have the nerve to ask her, and that it would just happen that she was available.
That date was Friday night. Daddy asked me about going to church Sunday. And that was almost more of a date, wasn't it? So he came over and we went to church. Of course, in those days, you know, we went to church Sunday school in the morning and church in the evening. But I remember after that Sunday date at church, we went for a walk, and I guess we walked for Turkey Mountain all over Provo, and just kind of visited and really got acquainted. And that was more, shall I tell that? Anyway, when we came home, we'd been walking for an hour and a half or more, talking and getting acquainted.
Let me just mention, before you mention about your getting home, that some of the things that we talked about were really kind of important things. For instance, that what we plan to do, and whether we plan to have a family, and what we would name the children. And it was really interesting about naming the children, because I mentioned that I always planned to name my boy John. Jennie says, well, that's what she thought too. And one, David, says, well, that's what she thought too. And a girl, Mary, and that's what she thought too. It was really interesting that we had the same ideas of what we were going to name our children.
Well, after that, anyway, when I came home, in our home, which was on 3rd East and 3rd North, corner in Provo, but Father built a new home right next to it. And some of us were getting quite grown up by then, and My sisters, 3 sisters and I shared one bedroom. We had a drop bed that 2 of us slept in, and then a double bed that the other 2 slept in. But I came home and they'd all gone to bed. And so I closed the door quietly and turned on the light and woke them up, the other 3. And looked at me kind of bleary-eyed, still half asleep. And I said, I'm going to tell you girls something. I don't want you to say a word about it to anyone. But this young man that I went out with tonight's the man I'm going to marry. And they said, oh, what other kind of a pipe dream? Why did you wake us up? They thought I was joking or something, but I wasn't.
Well, that was really quite an unusual date, and I was really kind of timid and kind of concerned about the family because I kept hearing so much about all of the things that they had done, and I was a little bit afraid that their family was so well known and no one had heard of our family at all. And it kind of worried me. And then they had things really nice. Everything was showed that they had a real organization and a real big family. I think I was impressed favorably with everything, but a little bit concerned whether I could provide, and I really think I started right in thinking about whether or not I could supply the expectations of that family situation. But they were very thoughtful of me, and especially Jennie's mother. I never had one single ounce of anything except encouragement and appreciation and just close friendship. But her dad, I felt he was a little more realistic. He kind of questioned about where I'd been raised, who my folks were, and what I planned to do,
and if he was a good Republican.
Yeah, he was really interested in B.H. Roberts. B.H. Roberts was my mission president. He was a Democrat. And he talked about politics, he talked about business, he talked about families, and he was pretty observant, but very thoughtful and very friendly. And while I mentioned that Grandma was the most encouraging in that, I don't think anything that Jennie's father did was really discouraging. It was just realistic and thoughtful, and gave me very definitely to understand that Jennie was special. And he always felt that way, and I appreciated that because I thought she was too.
Why don't you tell us about how you actually officially proposed?
That was sometime later, wasn't it?
Well, that was quite a, your father called a little family meeting when you were going to go teach school up in Ammon, or when
Well,
you...
it wasn't exactly that, Dad. The superintendent had come down to see if I would like to teach there, and I had to make a decision.
And actually, I was invited, kind of like laying on the carpet, that I was involved in this decision making. And I remember that I was so anxious to be a good help her in making the decision. That I told about all the good people out to Hammond and how good community it was, and how close it was to Idaho Falls, all the good things, and tried to be objective. And Jennie's father says, well, what about your plans? What are you thinking? And I remember that I had deep down in me that I sure wished that I could just say, well, I'm ready to ask you, I can marry your daughter, and I'm all prepared to take care of her, but I just couldn't say that because I didn't have any real resources or anything ready. And so I sort of said that there was time enough that we would talk about that later, and kind of acted like I was just a advisor about territory and about the business at hand.
Actually, you know, Daddy's parents, when they died, or prior to that, left a certain amount of money for the boys to have their missions, and maybe something for Maud, their sister, you know, to be taken care of. But I think he had just received word that that was all gone. There wasn't a penny, so he was 100% sure on his own. So that kind of clarifies. But in answer to your question, Nancy, when he actually proposed, he never did. Oh, that's true. We just kind of, well, I don't remember when we just gradually got closer and closer to talk about when and all about it. But I suppose the closest was when we had this speech contest, you know, at the Salt Lake Tabernacle. And that was a little while after this or before, I can't remember. But I had, in those days we had competition in the whole church. We'd have church-wide public speaking, and I had prepared a talk and really wanted to give it. And I gave it thinking it was really a good one in our ward. But in those days, the students, you know, lived in the wards. They didn't have housing on campus. And we had 6 or 8 in our ward. And I gave my talk. I thought it was really good. And here, several others gave theirs, and I wasn't even given first, second, or third. But I got to think about it, and for the next year, I still was convinced that was a good talk, and I gave it good. So I entered again, and lo and behold, I won in the ward, and in the state, and in the district, and in the region, and here I was at the finals of the Salt Lake Tabernacle. And I remember Delbert was there, and when President Grant gave me the Tabernacle, you know, gave me this little pin that I have. I'll have to get that someone. But it was after that we kind of went for a walk, and actually talked about, you know, getting married. But I don't think we ever came down to say, will you marry me? And I said, yes, I don't. It was just kind of understood a little more and more all the time.
We're going to... Okay, what was, oh, tell us some of the main qualities you saw in each other before you were married that attracted you.
You know, I think my first observation of Jennie was how real thoughtful she was, as well as beautiful and helpful and intelligent, and how easy it was to visit with her, and how helpful she was at encouraging me to do the things that I really wanted to do. It just seemed like she just had in mind the same things that I did, and then I was really impressed with how well she did everything, how she was in music and played the piano, she played the organ, she was in dramatics and gave readings, and she was really well respected by all of the family and all of the teachers, and I'll tell you, she really commanded my respect, and I really did respect her, and I thought it was special that someone that was so capable took an interest in me. I was really impressed with that.
That would be pretty necessary. Well, the qualities, that's quite a challenging question to me, and I'm not sure I can answer it as you'd expect. Because when I really became aware that this was, to be my eternal companion, the way I'd been reared, and knowing my mother. Do you remember my mother? Oh, no, of course you don't. You couldn't. But I just knew that someday I'd meet the right man, and that he was the one. And I was just aware, I wasn't really analyzing him to see if he had this or that or the other qualities. It was more of a spiritual experience that there he was, and he was just, I was aware, of course, that there'd be lots of challenges and things to work out, but that he really had a deep and true testimony of the divinity of this latter-day work, and really had a capacity to be a true father, which he certainly has been, and a great grandfather, and a true husband. I mean, I just kind of, it was more like a revelation or something than a mental analysis, and that, I just kind of knew that he was just the right one. Of course, my mother was, as he said, was really in love with Daddy from about the first time she saw him. And when my sister Rachel came up and visited his home and found that they didn't quite have things, that we had, we knew he was an orphan and so on, that didn't really matter. We knew what he was to be and would be. Of course, I'd had my patriarchal blessing and believed every word of it, and well, it was just kind of that, and everything has happened just that way. He's just been an amazingly wonderful husband, really a true companion, and really a leader in the church, because he loves others and he loves the Lord, and they just naturally respond that way. And I think even today, with our children all married and children of their own, they all come back to Dad when they really want real counsel. And he just has it, of course, through the years with all of these different callings in the community and the church and so on. It's just there,
Okay, why don't you tell us about what Grandpa Holbrook's reaction was when you announced that you were getting married?
You tell them, Grandma.
I think the way you tell it about this reception, I do.
One thing that Grandpa said that I was really impressed.
He wasn't surprised.
But he really gave permission all right, and seemed to be real pleased and approved. But he says, now, I'll give you a choice. You can have $125 in cash or a reception. And I really looked at the idea of $125 and thought that was a pretty good start. But Jennie was not so impressed with the $125.
The fact of the matter is that the decision was already made by Mother. There was going to be a reception.
But it was really, Grandpa, I'm sure, was perfectly satisfied with having the reception too, and very cooperative, and everything was real pleasant. There wasn't any problems.
I think we should mention here, Nancy, that, you know, Father had 9 girls, and he'd had one married. This is his, and he was thinking about all these friends, inviting them back every other year or so, you know. In fact, he kind of commented on that once. He wondered how all these friends were going to take it to be invited to a wedding reception, which usually implies a gift, you know.
Yeah.
And 9 girls in a row. Of course, at that time we had lost one.
Why don't you tell a little bit about your wedding, that marriage, the day of the marriage?
Well, our date was set for Wednesday. You know, Wednesday was always kind of the day for a marriage, it seemed like. So it was Wednesday, the 11th of June, 1930.
Salt Lake Temple.
In the Salt Lake Temple. And Jennie had arranged with Elder David O. McKay, who was a member of the Quorum of the 12 and a friend of both of us, really. He was my father's friend, but I hadn't made any contact with him, but Jennie had. And he said, I'll be glad to perform the wedding, but I've got a...
He said he would, Dad, right then.
Oh, yeah.
And one reason that we especially wanted him, his brother had married my mother's sister. And we were very close to Uncle Tom. And of course, President McKay and Aunt Jennie and Uncle Will were such close friends. But it was all set up for him to marry us.
And then something came up the last minute. And why don't you tell about that?
You know, Elder McKay was then, called me at home. I guess it was the day before. And he said that he had to leave town. And he was going to do his best to get back. But just in case things didn't work out, that he was going to leave word for someone else to take his place. And then he talked to me for, 6, 7, 8 minutes. Just gave beautiful messages as if he were performing the ceremony, you know, counsel. It was just beautiful. I've always wished I'd immediately written it down. And then on the day of the wedding, I think it was just the next day, we were there in the temple. Of course, that was a big occasion. We had all our relatives and grandparents and everything. And Grandpa wrote about it on Tingey. We ought to get that and write it. On any special occasion, you write some kind of poem. I'll see if I can find that just a couple of days ago. And we went through the temple, and, you know, it was a beautiful experience. I didn't know much about what was going on exactly. He had been through before being a missionary. But we and all of our party waited in that last room for over 2 hours because they had left word. We were the 43rd couple to be called out to be married, waiting for President McKay. President Joseph Fielding Smith married us, and it was just perfect. It was just great. That was our actual wedding in Salt Lake.
But we really did have a good long wait there. And we visited, and we waited, and we...
Well, we couldn't visit much, Dad. I was on one side of the room at that time, and you were on the other when they did it.
Oh, they had you waiting in the
Well,
other
they used
room.
to come. They kept us in this last room, and then they just called each couple up if they were being married. It was more efficiently arranged today. But we waited over 2 hours with all of our group with us. The others had gone quite some time. And then they called us, and we were married. It was a beautiful ceremony.
And the witnesses were Grandpa Brimhall and Grandpa Holbrook. They were the witnesses. And they had to wait, and that was probably quite a long wait for them. But we didn't know whether that was the usual thing, but as I think about it now, that was a big day. That was one of the big days in June, and Wednesday in the middle of June was probably one of the big wedding days in the temple.
Well, we were the 43rd couple.
Yeah, and we knew a few others that were married that same day. That is, there were some others that we were acquainted with. But that's, you know, to talk about it now, after living for 56 years since it happened, we kind of relate somewhat the experiences since then to it, instead of just as it was then. But it was really a very special day and a very special event, and it was really the beginning of a very special kingdom.
Yeah. Well, the Blairs want you to tell the story about crackers and cheese on your honeymoon.
Well, maybe before we do that, we stayed that night in the Hotel Utah, remember? Grandpa got the room. It was $5. That was quite a lot of money, but he thought, well, after all, should have something a little more elegant than that. You should be telling this.
Yeah, I really arranged for a room, and they just said that this was a good room, and I said, well, can I look at it? They said, sure, you can look at it. So I went and looked at it, and I said, don't you have something a little better than that? And they said, yes. So they gave us another room that was a little better, and it was $7.
We mentioned those prices, you know what they are today.
And I'm sure that the $7 room is one of their $70 rooms now.
At least, yeah.
But I think it'd be kind of fun to tell them what happened. It makes me laugh every time I think about it. So we told everybody goodbye. I can't remember the luncheon. Oh, I think we had one at Grandma Holbrook's. But anyway, we went to this hotel and went up to this room. And we visited for quite a while, and we had our prayer. And we went to bed, and Grandpa went to sleep. And I couldn't get to sleep. He was really worn out. And I thought about everything that happened, tried to figure it all out. And I got so, I was just as wide awake all night as could be. And it was getting kind of boring after all this time. He was sound. And so I got up very quietly and got all dressed. And I went downstairs. And it was a beautiful, cool evening, you know. So I went out and walked around and looked at all the sights. You know, I shouldn't have been doing that on my wedding night all alone, and it was kind of dangerous. It was about 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning. And then I finally came back. I didn't come back at all. And so I came back and about 5 o'clock and woke Daddy up. But I think it was so funny. You know, I think about, I really walked 2 or 3 blocks around and just kind of excited about the whole thing and trying to figure it all out.
I really had been raised on a farm, and I thought that when you go to bed, you just go to sleep, so that's what I did. Get up with the chickens in the morning.
One reason I mentioned it is because that next night was the reception, and that was such a big affair. We ought to talk a little bit about that before we talk about our honeymoon.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, the reception was really a big one, and it was in the church that's kind of over close to the cemetery in Provo.
Really, well, not really there, Dad. I'm
Well.
sorry. I shouldn't have said so. It was the newest finished chapel in church, and it was a beautiful new one. And it was such a big affair. But I think probably we should mention that about the program. We
Yeah.
had a program that was typical, and dancing,
Yeah,
with an orchestra.
It was a big area there, and the program was Uncle Will Knight was the master of ceremonies. And the speakers on the program were Grandpa Brimhall, President Emeritus of the BYU,
President Harris.
and President Harris, who was the president of the
Of
BYU,
course, he was our neighbor friend.
and B.H. Roberts, who was my mission president.
I think you should tell how we originally asked President B.H. Roberts to perform the ceremony.
It was really, as you look back now, you can see kind of a unfolding of something that hadn't happened yet then that has since come about. I just assumed that him being a general authority and the mission president, that he would be able to perform a marriage. So I asked him if he could perform a marriage, and he wrote a letter back,
We have it.
and he said, I have had the invitation from other missionaries, and there's nothing I'd rather do than perform the wedding, but the brethren haven't given me permission to perform marriages in the temple. And
Because he was a 70.
I don't think there's any use trying again, because I've been rebuffed each time I've tried. But as you look back now, you see the 70s now, the general authorities have all the authority to perform marriages, and to ordain high priests and ordain bishops. The 70s then didn't have authority to ordain high priests or to ordain bishops or to perform marriages in the temple. But President Roberts came to our reception and spoke, and we had
You had your side of the family represented by Aunt Clara Brooks.
quite a few of our family was there. And Joe? Hello. We had a real large group of all of our families were there. And the school was just barely out, and so all of our classmates and friends. And we got, I think it was 17 salt and
Pepper shake sets.
Wow.
And it was interesting as you look back on it. We thought that would really last us quite a while in giving wedding presents. And it wasn't very long until we had to buy ourselves salt and pepper shakes.
Get them all away.
Okay, why don't you tell us about your honeymoon, where you went?
Well, we decided to go down to the southern Utah parks. And we had a few friends and acquaintances down there, and we thought especially to go down to the where the rusts were. What was the name of that? forest or park. Kaibab. We went to Zion's and Bryce and Grand Canyon, and as we got into the Kaibab, we really had a beautiful scene there. We had lots of deer and animals and beautiful trees, and we wanted to really have a good place to stay. But the price was really, when we thought about $7 at the Hotel Utah, the price for the lodging that we had there at the Kaibab was $12. And we thought, well, that's all right, we'll spend the $12. But it'll be so expensive here to eat that we'll just make a lunch ourselves. So we spent the day and the night there, and we had crackers and cheese, and we had just a very, very inexpensive lunch that we prepared ourselves. And then when we checked out, after that, they said, your rate included 3 meals.
First we felt very hungry, and then we laughed hilariously.
But that was really an experience. We were just so aware of the expense, and we thought we were saving a lot of money by not eating it there, because we thought that would sure be expensive. We paid for it and didn't get it. We laughed about that and thought about how inexperienced we were. So the Blairs, they apparently heard about that, and I just imagine that in their experience, they've had a lot of experience, they've done some things kind of like that they'd like to know that we also have done some foolish things.
Why don't you tell us what one of the greatest challenges in your married life has been, now that you've got 56 years of experience?
What's your greatest challenge, Grandma?
It's quite a deep, profound question. You have to consider that a while. Challenges. Well, I guess we're here on earth with a challenge to learn and to grow. And every day's been a challenge. Some of the great challenges, I don't know. They just came gradually and normally, and some of the great blessings, of course, have been, I guess, greatest is our children and our growth in understanding more of the spiritual things and the marvelous plan of the Lord for Heavenly Father, for His children's happiness. We just try to do it. So I suppose we have certainly grown tremendously in that respect, understanding how blessed we really are. More than we can explain. Okay, Daddy, you take over. I'll do some other thinking.
One of the challenges that we handled as best we could was with the children having so many that when we would take trips, it was hard to all go together. And we handled that, I thought, in a satisfactory way, but it was really a challenge. For instance, when Mary was ready to graduate from high school, we sensed that she would be leaving, and we'd like to have the children have a trip. And I think that just like John Enoch, your folks are having a trip with John Enoch because next year he'll be in college. Well, somebody had to stay home with the little children. And so we arranged that I would go and take Mary and Julia and John and David. And then we decided to take Boyd, who was the same age as John, my brother Leroy's son. So that made us a good carload, and we took a trip. And then later we had another trip, leaving out Mary and Julia and John. And we took David as the oldest one. He had been the youngest one before. David and Dick and Dee and Joe. And I think and we went back east and got a new car and visited all the church sites. I guess one of the real fun things, it wasn't a challenge, but on this first trip, we went to Independence, Missouri, where our next door neighbor, who had grown up with our kids, was just a little bit older, was on a mission. And this is kind of interesting because just a couple of weeks ago he was made our state president. But he was there on a mission in Independence, and the children, of course, knew Ben Allen so well, and he was so excited to show them around. And one of the things that he showed us that was real special to him and special to us was the garden and all the plants and all the shrubs and all the trees and all the flowers and everything that was there in the big yard at the Independence headquarters. And as he surveyed it and had us look at it, he says, "The Garden of Eden." But I think our trips, we had lots of them, and we had to arrange them so that we were taking care of the older children and the younger children. And that carried on when the children went on missions. When John finished his mission, I went back to meet him, and we toured and saw the South Pacific. When Mary finished her mission, Jennie went to meet her and visited in Europe and the area. And I remember so well, while Mama was visiting with Mary and touring on the way home, Dick got his mission call to Finland, and I sent her a cable to go up to Helsinki and see what kind of a place Finland was. But then when Dick finished his mission, I went to meet him. And then when Dee finished his mission, the children were a little older then. Mama and I both went. And
that's about the first time, we both went.
Yeah.
We were very, very,
yeah,
the children and their absolute perfect care as possible always took top priority, and both of us just wouldn't be gone. In those days, we didn't used to get babysitters.
we
We didn't think they were any good enough.
we just never did. Mama and I just go away and leave the children until they were older. One of us stay with them. But I think the challenge of participating in the church and in the school and in music, I think it was a real challenge for us, and I think we didn't do a perfect job of it when we were having the children take piano lessons, for instance. One of the piano teachers said, "I think what you ought to do is save your money." And instead of saying, "I don't think that's what we ought to do," we let some of them stop taking piano lessons.
That was when two of the boys were real naughty, and sure times we leave them out there, and instead of going into their lesson, they'd go behind the house and go play on the railroad tracks. We came across them. But that blew over. I think one challenge, or it was a real privilege, a real opportunity, but it was a challenge, Nancy, was Daddy, right from the beginning, was very involved not only in church leadership positions, but in the community, in his profession. And that really was quite a challenge. You know, it required a lot of time. He was running for political office. You know, he almost was elected mayor twice. We knew both times it couldn't be, but because there was an organization here that was bad. I mean, that's what they kind of wanted him to run. They wanted to break that, but he got about 49% of the votes. So. But anyway, that was a great experience. And then he ran for the legislature and several things. Of course, he was president of the Kiwanis Club, president of the Chamber of Commerce, president about everything. And in his profession, so involved and so active, and so that he was needed outside as well as at home in the church. And that was, we've always been so glad that we worked together on things like that.
But in all of the real important things, the home and Mama's influence with the children and her support, and I was trying to make a living, and it was really an exciting thing. The community was growing, and we were having opportunities to organize institutions that were needed, and as the community grew, they have grown. We had an opportunity to get right in at the beginning with the broadcasting company, and in the beginning with the bank. And we,
of course, he organized the national appraisers.
In the appraisal work, it was new. There's really a lot of romance in living over a period of time, seeing things develop, and they were all challenges. But one thing about Grandma, she always was very supportive. I'll just mention this. During the war, I was on the committee to arrange for labor on the farms when the war was on. I was down to a meeting at the courthouse, and I had applied for a position in a class back in Champaign-Urbana in appraising, and the class was filled up. They had a limited number. And as I was down to this meeting, John, our oldest son, came out of breath and says, "Mama just had a telegram that just came to you saying that there was an opening, and she wants you to come right home and get ready."
He had to get on the train.
And get on the train at midnight. And I actually did. But that was the kind of support, you know, that ordinarily someone with lesser faith and lesser cooperation was, when he comes home, I'll show him the telegram and it's too late, but...
Well, I don't know that, but anyway, he took several of these courses and did very well, and I don't know if you know much about his business, but he became a recognized appraiser, you know. He did these big appraisers for Harrimans and DuPonts and Rockefellers and really big things, you know. Of course, he was so active in the realtors, president of Idaho and vice president of the National Association, traveled Hawaii, Alaska, and all over giving lectures and things. He was very prominent in it. And
But it wouldn't have been possible without Mama being very supportive and very anxious that
I couldn't have been otherwise.
do these things, but she stayed and tended the home, and it was always a home. As we traveled, either of us or any time we traveled, the best thing about it was getting back home.
That's always true.